Hey everybody, let's talk about shields. Understanding how shields affect gameplay will make you a better designer because shields are a fundamental concept. So let's talk about it in terms of Space Engineers and in terms of Scython's shield mod, which is a popular mod that came out fairly recently. You've probably seen it before. The way that Scython's shield mod works is you attach various shield cores and you boost them in various ways, and in the end you have a mass of points, in this case 2 million. So this ship has 2 million points. When you get hit, it deducts from those points instead of damaging the bricks. Pretty straightforward, right? Well, is it good? Is it bad? Shields do 3 things, and I'm wagging my fingers like you can see them. Normally speaking, any given game will choose one of these 3 elements and have their shields do that one thing. Sometimes they choose 2, but even 1 would be good enough. The first thing that they can do is they can give you freedom to act. So, for example, in Halo, you have a shield. Now, what's the difference between Halo and Resident Evil, besides all the obvious things? Well, both of them have a core competency of the exact same thing. They've got health and guns, and when you get damaged, your health drops. It's a persistent kind of damage, and it's really difficult to regenerate your health. The biggest difference is that Halo has a shield. So, if you try and play Halo with no shield, you're going to be just terrified all the time because your health does not regenerate, and so every single hit you take is like, oh my god! Sort of like if you play Fallout with no regeneration. You're like, oh my god, everything. The shield, however, gives the Halo player freedom to act. They've got enough free points, enough damage resistance to go out into the open, shoot some enemies, run away, try some stuff out, survive an ambush, and they know that they can fall back on their health if things get out of control, but their shields allow them a lot of freedom to act, and that's why Halo is an action game instead of a horror game. That can't happen in Space Engineers. Ships are too slow and there's not enough stuff to hide behind. In order for the shield to provide you freedom to act, you have to be able to withdraw. And you can't do that in Space Engineers. You can jump away. You do have jump drives, but they have a 10-second countdown. So, let's see. I have 2 million shield points, which is an absurd quantity. Oh, they're gone. Yeah, these shields are really weak. Even if you multiplied them by 10, they'd still be kind of weak. And moreover, they're really, really heavy. So these do not provide you with freedom to act. You cannot act fast enough to have that matter. Now you might be saying, oh come on, that's like a full missile barrage. That's ridiculously huge amounts of firepower. That's pretty ordinary. I regularly fire that much firepower and hit with it. That's in the Fleet Breakers tests. That's the kind of firepower we use. It's totally ordinary. If that is not how much firepower you use, then maybe you're designing your ships a little on the light side in terms of firepower. That's all I can say about that. So these shields are balanced to someone who doesn't have very much damage output, which makes them not very effective at providing you with any kind of freedom to act. They'd have to have a much, much, much longer lasting value in order for that to actually be effective. Now, maybe that's enough time for a fighter. Like, you just get hit by a couple of bullets or maybe a missile, you just got to maneuver around, get yourself behind something, get some distance. I can see it mattering for a fighter, but for a capital ship, this is just not even vaguely useful. At least, not for that first value. You can't turn this into Halo. Your ships aren't fast enough and there's nothing to hide behind. Oh, boo-hoo. No Halo. That's fine. The shields have 2 other kinds of roles they can play. Second kind of role, statistical complexity. This is where you would manage your shield. Like, output to the shields, 100%. Boost the shields, cycle the shield phase coordinates, whatever. Having managing your shields be a major element is a lot of fun. You got to think about it. Like, okay, well, do I maybe change the shield out so that it's explosive protection or energy protection or bullet protection? Maybe you got 3 different phases and you switch between them depending on the kind of enemy you're planning on facing or the kind of situation you're in. Maybe it's range-based, like if the enemy is at 500 meters, then you deploy one kind of shielding because the bullets are traveling slower or something. Now, obviously, that's all stuff that cannot be implemented very easily, if at all, in Space Engineers. In fact, shields can't be implemented in Space Engineers. This is frigging magic. Scython has implemented something that is basically impossible. There is no way for shields to work in Space Engineers, yet he has made them work. So hats off to him. This is a masterpiece of a hack. It's just not very useful at either one or two of the things that shields can do. It can't offer you freedom to act, and it's not statistically complicated. Now, there is an easy way to make it statistically complicated. If you have one of these plugin modules, which makes the shields draw 10 times as much power and regenerate 10 times faster or 5 times faster, then I could turn those modules on and off, and that would simulate, more power to the shields, or reduce power to the shields so we can maneuver better. That would give us a lot more freedom to actually statistically manage the shields. But as I showed you, the shields don't last long enough to statistically manage. They go away in less than a second, and I mean, this is not a small number of shields. So, yeah, you'd have to make these shields a lot more durable before you could statistically manage them, even with that kind of element. In addition, because they act as a pool, you cannot disable elements that have been damaged or have elements turn off and regenerate. I think that would be really cool. What if your shield could not regenerate while it was on? And instead what happened is when you turn these modules off, or turn them to passive or whatever, then they regenerate. But the modules that are on do not regenerate. They have a specific number of shield points, and that's it until you turn them off, or until they run out, go to 0, and automatically turn off. And in that way, you could have a fun situation where you can layer your shields, and certain modules will take more damage or less damage, and they'll turn off faster or turn off slower, regenerate faster, regenerate slower. Then you'd get some good statistical management out of it. I don't know how possible that is, though. He's using a pool of points rather than having each individual shield system have its own situation. You could still do it, though. You could have it like only the ones that are off regenerate, something like that. I don't know. Either way, interesting ideas, none of which are implemented, so it is not statistically complex. What's the third thing shields can do? They can be vectored. So, for example, Star Trek, the MMO, you run around and your shields are a big part of your tactics, because each face of your shield has a different amount of resistance, and as your front shield gets damaged, you turn and you absorb damage with your other shield. You start to maneuver, and this is really, really complex when you get 2 or 3 enemies and you're trying to outmaneuver them and keep them all on the same side of your ship. And you got stuff like, well, what sort of fire arcs do I have? I don't know how possible that is in this, because I don't know how he's using his system, but there are 2 basic approaches. One would be you could make each of these little shield modules like a spherical gravity generator. You would be able to pick a radius, and that radius would determine either the power cost or the durability of the shields. And in that way, you would add topological complexity to your shield generators. Another way to do it would have them be vectored, so each one would be like a cannon, and it'd be like, okay, well, this one is pointing forward, so it only protects blocks in front of it, and maybe only in like a certain arc. Like it protects blocks in a 3x3 pillar in front of it. And then you might have enough shielding to protect blocks here and here and here, but down the middle there's no shielding, and you can actually see the enemy cut a path down the center of your ship 1 block wide because you don't have quite enough shielding. That would be cool. And if your shielding gets damaged, then you would lose like pieces of coverage, and you might lose this particular part of your ship, and this particular part of your ship would start to carve away. That would be cool as hell. But alas, that's not how it's implemented, and I don't even know if that's possible in Space Engineers. The back end is very complex and sometimes not programmed the best. So, in short, this does not do any of the 3 things shields need to do. It's not a bad mod, it's quite a masterpiece of hacking, but it's also not a good mod because it doesn't add to your gameplay. It does sort of do that third thing. Just a little bit. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, the actual shield modules have been balanced to be excruciatingly heavy. Obviously that makes your ship slower, but what else does it do? The durability of every kind of block depends entirely on the mass of the block. The number of objects in the block is how much damage resistance it has, and they go away one at a time, depending on how much damage you take. These are balanced to be extraordinarily heavy. They are heavier than the similar amount of heavy armor. What this means is that although the actual shielding is very, very minor and doesn't really serve much purpose, as armor blocks, these shield modules are fantastic. So, tell me what you think of the mod, tell me what you think of the gameplay elements, tell me if you understand what I'm trying to get at when I talk about how shields affect gameplay, and maybe I'll see you at a Fleet Breakers event. Maybe not.